Thank you. Thank you. Wow, these speakers are great today. It's really an honor to be one of the speakers here. The person who just tweeted they wanted to cheer up, I assure them I will do my best with this topic. I want to talk about the psychological and cultural issues that keep us from dealing with global climate change. I struggled preparing this speech. No one really wants to think about these overwhelming problems. And I want every one of you today to be happy and have a good experience when you listen to me. With this topic, it will be a challenge to make it happen. I'll start with the most difficult material, then move into heartening information. Stay with me, please. There will be a turning. Isaac Dennison wrote, "All sorrow can be borne if put into a story." I'll begin with my story. In July, I read Bill McKibben's Earth, E-A-A-R-T-H, in which he argues that we now live on a new planet with a rapidly changing ecology. He predicts that without immediate action, our familiar ways of life will disappear, not in our grandchildren's adulthoods, but in the lifetimes of middle-aged people alive today. He writes, we don't have 50 years to save our environment, we have the next decade. When I finished Earth, I was shell-shocked. For a few days, all I could experience was despair. Everything felt so hopeless and so over. During this time, my grandchildren came to visit. As we picked raspberries, I thought of all the care we lavished on the children in our family. We made sure they ate healthy food and brushed their teeth with safe toothpaste. We examined and treated every little bug bite or cat scratch, and yet we, and by we I mean all the grandparents in the world, including myself, hadn't worked to secure them a future with clean air and water and diverse, healthy ecosystems. Had I been in a trance, that summer when I listened to my friends talking about mundane details of life, I wanted to shout at them, wake up, please wake up. Matters are urgent. We have to do something now. But after years of being a mother and a therapist, I have learned that shouting wake up doesn't work. In fact, that was one of my most dispiriting realizations. I desperately wanted to preserve the world I loved, but I didn't even know how to share this fact with my closest friends. What pulled me out of my despair was my desire to get to work. I didn't know what I was going to do. I felt virtually unqualified for everything involving saving our environment, but I knew I had to do something. It was unclear how much my action would benefit the world, but I was sure it would help me. I have never been able to tolerate stewing in my own anxiety. Action has always been my healing tonic. I invited a group of people to my house to discuss what we could do to stop TransCanada from shipping tar sand sludge through our state via the Keystone XL pipeline. We called ourselves the Coalition, and for 2 years now we have met for potlucks and planned actions. Our campaign has been a complicated story about money, power, international corporations, and politics. But it's also been a very simple story about my friends and me working to save our state from what we call the extra leaky pipeline. This citizen rebellion has been the best thing to happen to Nebraska since Big Red football. We've had tractor brigades and poetry readings against the pipeline. Our Sierra Club attorney was given a standing ovation in a VFW hall in a little town where historically, if you were a Democrat, you kept that to yourself. As Randy Thompson, our conservative icon, said, this pipeline issue is not a political issue. There is no red water or blue water. There is clean water and dirty water. And that's what our coalition has been about. In January 2012, President Obama denied a pipeline permit, in part because of concerns about Nebraska. But the outcome of our struggle is still uncertain, and we may lose our fight. The thing is, our coalition is not about odds. Especially when we started, we didn't think we had a chance. We did it because we couldn't let our state be damaged without a protest. Our reward for this work has been a sense of empowerment and agency and membership in what Martin Luther King called a beloved community. And we discovered that whether or not we believe we can change the world, even in a small way, acting as if we can is the healthiest emotional stance to take in the face of injustice and destruction. Neuroscientists, by the way, confirm this. As Dan Siegel put it, the mind functions best when it acts as if there is hope. Life in this century is very stressful. Panic disorders are the culturally induced disease of our times. We think something is wrong with us, but the problems are endemic and systemic. As a people, we have lost our sense of place and our grounding in deep time. Our problems are root relationship problems. We have a disordered relationship with the web of life. Right now, the more we connect the dots between events, the more frightened we are. Now, this reminds me of a story involving my grandchildren. Kate was 7 and the 2 younger ones were 5 and 3 when they came to my house, and we slept outside all night in a tent. And as we're lying in the tent at dusk, the 2 younger children are very happy. We're listening to the cicadas, we're enjoying the cool air of the evening. But Kate is extremely worried, and she kept kind of saying, "Nana, I don't know if I want to sleep outside. This is kind of scary." And stupidly, I chided her, and I said, "Kate, your younger brother and sister are braver than you. You're the oldest. You should set a good example. Why are you the one who's complaining?" And she just looked at me indignantly, and she said, "Nana, they're children. They don't know enough to be scared." Neither individuals nor cultures can keep up with the pace of change. Recently, I was telling these same grandchildren about the things that didn't exist when I was a girl. I mentioned televisions in my rural area, cell phones, the internet, cruise control, texting, computerized toys, laptops, video recorders, headphones for music, and microwaves. The list was so long that when I finished, my grandson Aiden asked me, "Nana, did they have apples when you were a girl?" We are bombarded by too much information, too many choices, and too much complexity. We have Paleolithic arousal systems, Neolithic brains, medieval institutions, and 21st century technology. Our problem-solving abilities and our communication and coping skills have not evolved quickly enough to sustain us. The climate crisis is so enormous in its implications that it's difficult for us to grasp. Thinking about global climate collapse is like trying to count 2 billion pinto beans. Oftentimes, because we don't know how to respond, we don't respond. We developed what psychologists call learned helplessness, and our sense that we are powerless becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. This reminds me of one night a couple summers ago when I was writing this book, which is a very hard book to write, as you might imagine. And I'd been struggling all day in my study. And meanwhile, we'd had a week where a tree fell and broke our heating air conditioning system, and our refrigerator went out, and our dishwasher went out. So we'd had appliance men and estimates all week long. And just before dinner, my husband Jim asked me if I'd like to have a glass of wine with him before dinner. And I go, "Well, I'll do it if we don't have to talk about global climate change. I don't even want to think about the fate of the earth." And Jim said, "I don't even want to think about the fate of our appliances tonight." So we all have those issues too. In States of Denial, Stanley Cohen writes about Germany and the denial of the Holocaust. He talked about a state of knowing, not knowing, that arises in ongoing traumatic situations. This, in quotes, willful ignorance, end quotes, occurs when information cannot be totally denied, but it cannot be totally accessed either. Now, partly our silence about these enormous global catastrophes can be explained by what Renee Lertzman calls the myth of apathy. She interviewed people about global climate change and found that most people actually care intensely about the environment, but that their emotions are so tangled up and upsetting, and they're so beset by internal conflicts that they cannot act adaptively. They are not apathetic, but rather in psychological shutdown. We all have a healthy and understandable desire to avoid feeling pain. It's part of our human inheritance. We want to savor the occasional shrimp cocktail without thinking about ruined mango groves, and read a book about lions to our children or grandchildren without wondering how many lions are left in the world. Yet while escapism is possible, escape is not. And we cannot solve a problem that we will not face. With awareness, everything is possible. Once we stop denying the hard truths about our environmental collapse, we can embark on a journey of transformation that begins with the initial trauma, the oh shit moment, and can end with transcendence. In fact, despair is often a crucible for growth. When our problems seem too big for us to tackle, there's really only one solution, which is we must grow bigger. As we expand ourselves to deal with what is the new normal, EAARTH, we can feel more vibrant and engaged with the world as it truly is. Amazement and action are both antidotes to despair. We have the gift of what the Lakota Sioux call the Wankantanka, the big mysterious. Whenever I'm really blue, my favorite thing to do with my despair, with my torpor, is to drive out to Spring Prairie, about half an hour from here, walk out alone on that prairie, lie down on the ground, look up through those beautiful tall grasses at the sky, and just stay there for about half an hour. And if I can do that, I can calm down, I can start to believe again in my life and in the life of the world. You know, in Nebraska, that big sky is our Rocky Mountains. But wherever you are, you can always see the sky. And as my friend Sherry put it, I've never seen an ugly sky. It is there for everyone in every place. Another antidote to despair is connection with animals. And I'll just give you one example of that. My friend Margie and I went with her dog Leo for a little walk. And during this walk, Leo did what happy dogs are prone to do. He turned over on his back and his paws were in the air, and he was just expressing such great joy. And Margie said to me, "You want to know what time it is? Ask a dog. He will tell you it's now, now, now." Another antidote to despair comes from expanding what I call our moral imagination, which is the ability to understand how the world looks and feels to another living being. Moral imagination involves motivation, heart, and creativity. And from my point of view, it leads to a very simple value system. Good is what enhances the moral imagination. In that sense, these TED Talks are good. Evil is what decreases one's own or the collective moral imagination. So hate speech, for example, is evil with this particular value system. And the purpose of my life, the purpose of life as I see it, is to grow our own moral imaginations and to help others grow theirs, so that by the end of our lives, our circle of caring, which begins with our families, eventually includes all living beings. So anyway, every day we have an opportunity to be a communicator and to expand our own moral imaginations and to teach others. And one example of this is there's a children's book with a CD called Hey Little Ant. Do any of you know this CD and book? In it, Philip and Linda Hoos wrote the book, and there's a song, Hey Little Ant, in which a boy is on a playground about to squish an ant. And he's explaining to the ant why it's going to be fun to squish him and how his friends are watching watching, and he really can't back down. And the ant is singing, but I have a wife and a family, and my life is as precious to me as yours is to you. And the chorus, the last chorus of this, is done by the narrator. And he says, should the ant get squished? Should the ant go free? It's up to the kid, not you and me. We'll leave that boy with the raised up shoe. Now, what do you think that boy should do? So I'm with Kate and Aiden and Claire, these grandchildren I've been referring to. And Kate and Aiden are older. And so they go, Nana, we promise we will never squish an ant again. We will be very careful and not kill bugs unless we really have to. But the little one, Claire, she was only 5 at the time, and she didn't really say anything. So I go, Claire, what do you think? What would you do if you were that boy? And she's quiet again another second or two, and then she goes, Nana, all I can promise you is I'll never squish a talking ant. So she still has a little growing room in her moral imagination. If we do not expand our moral imaginations, we will destroy ourselves. As Thich Nhat Hanh said, we inter-are. Interconnection can be seen as a spiritual belief, especially in Buddhism, but it's also a scientific fact. At its core, interconnection is a survival strategy. As Gregory Bateson said it best, the unit of survival is the organism and its environment. That is the unit of survival. The next great rights battle will be a fight to rescue our beleaguered planet. It will be about air, plants, animals, water, energy, and dirt. We have a right to a sustainable planet and a future for our grandchildren, and the meadowlark has this right, and the fox, and the bull snake, and the cottonwood. We are in a race between human consciousness and the physics and chemistry of the earth. In our great hominid journey, no one really knows what time it is. We could be at the end, or we could be at the beginning of a great and glorious turning toward reconnection and wholeness. We who are alive today share what Martin Luther King called, in quotes, the inescapable network of mutuality, end quotes. We are not without resources. We have our intelligence, humor, and compassion, our families and friends, and our history of resilient hominid ancestors. We can be restored. Since the beginning of time, how many people have loved and cared for each other in order for us to be alive today? How many fathers have hunted and fished, fought off predators, and planted grain so that we could breathe at this moment? How many mothers have nursed babies and carried water so that we could savor our small slice of time? We can never know the significance of our individual actions, but we can act every day as if our actions are significant. That will create only good for us and on earth. Besides, what is our alternative, really? What is our alternative? I'll end by a quote from Martin Luther King. Even if I knew the earth would fall to pieces, I would still plant a tree today. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.